Hey everybody, Yankee here. Today I want to answer a question from a viewer that asked me about gel testing. They wanted to know what I think of gel testing and how accurate is it in telling you how good a round will be for self-defense. It seems like people in the gun community either think that gel testing is useless, or a big percentage of people think it's the end-all be-all holy grail of ammo testing. And they will base what round they choose to carry or what caliber they choose to carry based on how it performs in gel. And is that a good idea? Well, I'll tell you one thing about gel testing. It only tells you one thing, and that's how rounds perform in gel. That's all it tells you. And that's all it's really meant to tell you. It is set up in a way so you have a measurable thing that you can say, all the circumstances were exactly the same in this test, and this is what the round did. Doesn't tell you how good it will be as a self-defense round. Doesn't tell you anything about the overall power of the round. And a lot of people think, well, the deeper it goes, the more powerful it is. No. When you're testing in gel, a lot of penetration has to do with how's the bullet shaped? How big is the bullet? How much resistance is there on that bullet? What type of bullet is it? If you just based it on how deep does a bullet go in gel to say, oh, this is how powerful this round is and this is how good it is for self-defense, well, you would think 22 long rifle is one of the best self-defense rounds you could possibly carry because it does really good in gel. It goes 15, 16, 18 inches easily because it's a tiny little bullet going really fast. But in human bodies or animals, it doesn't do so great. Because here's the thing, just because something does well in gel doesn't mean it'll get through dense muscle tissue, doesn't mean it will do well against bone, or even penetrate heavy clothing. Gel testing does not tell you any of that. It just gives you kind of a little benchmark test that you can compare rounds with, similar things happening. If it's something the same, which the gel is the same every time, what will these bullets do? But like I said, doesn't tell you much. Because a bullet that may perform amazingly well in gel might fail to penetrate dense muscle tissue. A bullet that does extremely well in gel might fail to penetrate a bone, might hit it and just stop. And a bullet that doesn't do that well in gel, like say the 22 long rifle goes 15 inches deep, and then this round only goes 12 inches deep, but this round might be devastating, and it might go through bone and hard barriers like nobody's business. Whereas something like 9mm or 22 wouldn't even get through the hard barrier at all. Because there's a huge difference between penetrating a solid substance and penetrating gel, which is kind of a semi-solid substance. Now, you could make gel much harder and see what those rounds did in that substance, still wouldn't tell you what it would do in a body. And that's not what it's meant to do. A lot of people have just taken gel testing and made it into something it's not supposed to be, was never intended to be, was never meant to be a measure of how good a stopper any round is. How good is it stopping a person or an animal? That's not what it's for. It's not what it does. Like I said, there are some devastating rounds that penetrate less than other rounds you might not even get through somebody's heavy wool coat with. Simply because of the size of the bullets, the way they're shaped, the geometry of the bullets, they might do better in that soft medium. Whereas other bullets that are bigger, heavier, slower moving, don't penetrate as far, might wreak much more devastating harm on an actual living creature. So these are ridiculous. And I've even seen people say, oh, I'll never carry this round because it penetrated all the way through the gel blocks, which means it over penetrates. It'll go right through people and hurt people behind that you didn't mean to hit, and you'll be at risk of, being liable for that, which is garbage. For one, overpenetration is something we've covered before and how it's not that much of a risk, period. But that same round that went through 2 blocks of gel, overpenetrated, you take it out, you shoot a feral hog with it, it goes 6 inches. Or it just barely does enough to get the job done. And that's because that's a real world example of how that round works against living tissue, not how it works in a semi-solid blob of gel. You can't learn much from gel testing other than some basic things like, velocity and mass. You can figure out some equations because of that. Like, things that have this velocity, have this surface area, are moving at this speeds, tend to do this well in gel. Doesn't tell you how good they are as people stoppers, animal stoppers, or much of anything else. Like I said, if you relied solely on gel testing, you'd think 22s, and especially 22 Magnum, you'd think that's the end-all be-all of stopping people cold when it comes to a caliber. But it isn't, because gel testing doesn't really tell you those types of things. I wish people would get off that, because like I said, it doesn't. It was never intended to. It's just because of a lot of ignorant people, especially on the internet, started out gun channels. They're like, hey, I can make a ballistics gel block, and people love these because they like to see them because it's easy to understand. And as long as we don't try to overcomplicate it and tell them what it really means, they'll think this means something. And since they don't really know anything about ballistics, or they counted on you not knowing anything about ballistics, they presented it like some sort of end-all be-all test for bullet performance. It is not. Like I said, though, however, it does give you some very useful information on how bullets perform. Do they travel straight? Do they tend to tumble? Do they tend to deviate their path when they hit any resistance? Are they moving at a good rate? All kinds of things you can learn from gel testing, especially when testing the stability of rounds. But as far as, are they a man stopper? Are they a capable self-defense round? Well, gel testing tells you almost nothing about that. And like I said, it was never intended to.